Alrighty, we're going to get started. So, hello everybody. Welcome to the Navan Spring Expense Product Release webinar. I'm Josh Truck on the Navan Expense and Payments Product Marketing team, and I will be your MC for today. So, it's great to see so many folks coming in, and we have more trickling in by the second, so we appreciate you being here. Excited to showcase what the team's been building and delivering to thousands of customers across the globe. So, just a few quick reminders before we get started. Google Chrome will likely be or give you the best experience. If you have questions, we highly encourage them throughout. Please pop them in the Q&A tab at any time. Some of our product experts might answer your questions during, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A section at the end. One other reminder, what we're covering today is confidential information. So if you're a Navan customer and you want to go deeper into anything we discuss, please reach out to your account manager. If you're not a Navan customer and you want to learn more, we can set up time with a member of our sales team or product team. Just mention that in your Q&A question as well. And yes, we will email you a recording after. We'll also send a survey at the end to let you know or to ask about your experience and see how we can continue to make these better and better. Next, so here's the team we're rocking with today. So I'm joined by 6 wonderful members of the Navan Expense product team, including Chief Product Officer Yuval Refua. So let's get into what we'll cover today. So Yuval will kick us off with a look at Navan's expense vision and some shifts we're seeing in the market. Then we'll dive into 4 release areas, all built for trust, speed, and scale across your expense workflows. With that, I will pass it over to Yuval.
Thank you, Josh. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. I'm Yuval. I'm the CPO for Payments and Expense. And I'm really excited to tell you today about our vision and the latest product launches that we're doing. Let's skip the next slide. So commerce is moving really faster. The old expense model, supported by the legacy systems, is broken. It's inefficient, it's reactive, and ultimately very risky to rely on. Usually, the first thing that happens is somebody swipes their card. Then finance teams chase policy, coding, reconciliation, and compliance after the fact. Good luck catching out of policy spend with that system. It causes admin to react way too late with limited visibility and control, taking up to 60 days to identify a violation and close the books, while employees waste time submitting expenses and going back and forth with reviewers. For those employees, many of the legacy products show how broken the model is. It takes 45 minutes to book a trip and 20 minutes to submit an expense, and that's before all the back and forth. I remember early in my career, all the information I had to copy from other system and paste it into my expense system just in order to submit an expense report. So moving on to the new world. Next slide. Organizations need a proactive control before the spend happens. For employees, it should be quick and easy. They need a Waymo-like experience. It needs to be simple, seamless, and low effort. That's why Navan built an intelligent layer that works in the background for employees, getting all the necessary data for them to automate the expense process. For admins, it's the complete opposite. They need a Formula One style of visibility and control with telemetry information coming at them, controlling every spend at scale. This is how they really squeeze those extra seconds from every lap. Admins want to control every dollar spent, but they need a product to enforce it at scale. To do that, we need to give them a system to partner with that they can trust, verify, ask questions, and identify anomalies. And because Navan Expense is built on deep travel foundation, that trust layer comes with rich context, flexibility, and unified infrastructure. So jumping into the next slide. Today, we will show you exactly how we're delivering on this promise with products that we launch. The question that we always ask is, how can we be the trusted partner for our admins and users? We'll talk about 4 things that we're delivering to customers. First, once you configure your policy and audit checks, Our AI adapts to your risk tolerance. It auto-codes expenses for you and automates reviews. This is exactly what our policy and audit engine is all about. Next, AI-powered admins. We'll make sure the right decisions are going to the right people. We'll suggest actions for admins on context, perform supervised tasks, and do the work when it makes sense. Third, for users to rely on the Waymo experience, we need to meet them where they are. Expense chat agents allow our users to drop receipts and context about their expenses, and we'll handle the rest in seconds. And lastly, trust has to work everywhere your business operates. Whether that's ensuring European employees get expense advances, reclaiming VAT, tracking mileage, and more. With that said, I'll pass it over to Thomas to walk you through our policy and audit engine and show you exactly what proactive control looks like in practice.
Amazing. Yeah. Thank you, Yuval. And yeah, thanks everybody so much for joining. I'll always love to have such a good group here. Um, Josh, can we go to the next slide? Yeah, so I do want to start with this poll. I think as a former finance and accounting person myself, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'm curious, yeah, what kind of keeps people up at night during month end close? Curious what the results are. Okay. Chasing employees for missing receipts and information. Yeah, that's the one we tend to hear the most, that's for sure. I think it's kind of a constant battle, and there's a lot that we're doing on our side to try to help fetch receipts automatically, remind people as much as we can, but yeah, it's definitely, you know, always part of the job. Next slide, Josh. Cool. So I think just to kind of level set a little bit on kind of the next things we'll talk about here is, I think for finance and accounting teams, a lot of times people don't get into finance and accounting in order to do all of this kind of menial work that has to happen. There's a lot of other reasons why you kind of get into finance and accounting in the first place. And I think a lot of the old way of managing expenses, uh, required disconnected systems and a lot of manual reviewers. So yeah, third-party audit tools or a lot of manual coding or kind of rules-based coding that got really complex and out of hand. All sorts of reviewers that had to check transactions one by one to find audit issues or policy issues or coding issues. I think the vision that we have for Navan for finance and accounting teams is, you know, the ability to set up policy and audit checks upfront in real time and have the software actually enforce those on your behalf. And also have agents that go through and code transactions, based on your past patterns and based on transaction context and trip context and other things that we'll talk through after this. Um, so yeah, Kylie at Pendo, she's great. She's their head of global accounting, and really has seen a lot of benefit to the use of Navan in terms of the way it's able to automate the approval and review of transactions, which saves them a lot of work, which is great. But yeah, with that, let's jump into to our audit engine, and kind of some of the more recent things we've built around that. So today, you can configure, if you go into policy settings, flag management, you'll see kind of all of our audit flags. So, of course, in our policy section, you can set up policy limits and receipt requirements and things like that. That's kind of one part of it. But there's also all sorts of audit checks, right? So excessive tipping or cigarettes on a receipt or booking amount mismatch or things like that. There's kind of this extra added layer where admins can go in and turn these flags on or off, configure different thresholds for kind of your risk tolerance and your policy. I think a common example of this is late submission. So if if your policy is that people can't submit after 60 days after the transaction has occurred, you can kind of set that threshold right here. Um, and I do want to call out one thing that we've shipped recently in here as well, which is the anti-corruption and bribery check. I think it is pretty company specific, but a lot of companies, in order to comply with the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, kind of need to screen transactions, to find participants that are sanctioned or that are government employees. And we've partnered with the London Stock Exchange Group to basically bring that directly into Navan at, as an audit check. So yeah, this really gives you a lot of control up front to tell Navan, hey, go enforce all these policies on my behalf. And that on top of our policy engine has led to the fact that 73% of transactions today flowing through Navan are completely touchless. And we're trying to up that percentage as much as we can. Next slide, Josh. Yeah, I think that this is one part of this that I talked about. We have agents that screen receipts, L3 data, transaction data to find prohibited items. So one thing, for example, is you can flag transactions that have cigarettes or alcohol or gift cards on them, for example. And of course, that's semantics. So if there's a receipt that says Marlboro Reds, that's going to be flagged as cigarette being on the transaction. You can also even do it by specific keywords that you care about. So these are some of the keywords that a lot of our customers have kind of decided to flag, and anything around upgrades or massages or maybe dry cleaning at a hotel that people want to flag. There's a lot of customization here that you can really set up front. Great. So let me go th that's kind of the audit engine. I think that I'd love to go through kind of our coding agent here because this is one of the more exciting things I think that we've been able to launch recently. You know, pre the world of AI, you could kind of work to auto code transactions using the MCC code of the merchant or the name of the merchant and different rules and things like that. And we definitely worked on that model for a while, but the latest models, the most advanced models, have gotten us to a point where we can really, really get intelligent about how we code transactions to the right expense type. I have some reasoning examples up there. For those that are interested, you can definitely read through it. But we're at a point now where we can code transactions to the right expense type with 90+% accuracy, using receipt data, L3 data, transactional data, the user's role, the calendar invite, all sorts of things. I mean, you can see one example here is that somebody registered for the McDonald's Worldwide 2026 conference. In that case, McDonald's was the merchant, but our agent was able to see that the receipt was for this conference, and that the description included some details about the conference. So it was able to code it to conferences instead of meals. I think that's just one small example, but it really means that with all of the data we have as Navan, again, trip data, L3 data, receipt, all sorts of other things, your past coding, we can really, really get much, much better here. And we rolled this out fully for manual transactions as well as card transactions yesterday. So definitely a lot going on here. And I think the second part of this that I really want to double down on is that our kind of model and our agents are working to get smarter over time. So we basically built an ability for admins to come in and learn and kind of prompt the AI or give it training. So today as an admin, if you go in and edit an expense type on a transaction, we'll actually prompt you to tell us why you updated it, as if you're training someone new, basically. And then we take that and we can feed it back into our models to help make the coding more and more accurate over time. So I hope that's something that our admins can take advantage of.
Did you want to hop into a short
Great.
demo, Thomas?
Yeah, let's do it. Cool. So I'll demo two things today. I think I'll start here on the flag management side. I think this is something that hopefully most of you are familiar with, but yeah, if you go into configuration, policy settings, and flag management, you can kind of come in here and see all of our different audit flags, including the new kind of corruption and bribery check. And from here, yeah, you can set different thresholds, toggle these on or off for ones that you care about or don't care about, set different things. So if you want to catch keywords, like I said, or different prohibited items on transactions, you can catch that as well. I think this is another one I want to highlight, which is auto verifying receipts. So receipts that are blurry or invalid, we're able to catch those as well through our audit checks. So definitely something I think that's great for admins to leverage. Um, I'll touch real quick as well on the coding agent. So I think, you know, I love hearing feedback from finance and accounting teams as much as I possibly can. And so we track this very closely. But today, like I said, as an admin, if you come in here and you change the expense sign up on something, we'll prompt you to tell us why you made that change. So you can say, changed it because, it was this user usually transacts at gas stations for gas, whatever you want to say. And once you submit that, that comes actually to me and our team in real time. And we're able to feed that back to the model to improve the coding for you in the future. Um, so yeah, that's it on our coding agents and our audit engine. And I'll pass it off to the next team.
Thank you, Thomas. Great to meet you guys. I'm Pauline. I'm a product manager on the expense admin team, and I'm excited to kind of walk you guys through some of the exciting stuff that we're working on. The way I like to think about this is, here at Navan, we make tracking and managing expenses very easy across the org. Up to, I'd say, like 75% of expenses by your employees are usually like auto approved by the policy that you set up. But today I will be spending some time talking about the 25% of these expenses that will go through manual reviews. And, at the end of the day, you can only automate so much. I think the reason why these policies exist is to kind of communicate to the org the different ways they should be spending. But, for the ones that fall out of policy, how do we, as admins, review these in a more efficient and quicker way? I'll be chatting through a couple of recent features that we ship, but also focus a lot on some of the AI features that we have in the pipeline. So to get started, we wanted to run a poll. I think I kind of have a sense of the answer here, given the earlier poll as well. But I wanted to know what usually delays admins from easily, quickly resolving flag transactions. Are you chasing employees? Oh, I lost the, okay, chasing employees, you're waiting for manager to approve, or there's just a lot of flag transactions that pile up. So pretty consistent. There's a lot of chasing employees for missing receipt, missing fields, missing information. So I'm excited to chat through some of the efforts that we have to make that easier. So next slide. So one of the things that we shipped recently, and this is kind of a result from one of the big pain points that we're hearing from a lot of admins, is while Navan makes expenses and expense tracking very easy, sometimes it's too easy. And, managers will go in and just approve things. So they're not the bottleneck, but sometimes they make the wrong approval. Sometimes the employee hasn't provided the receipt yet. They haven't provided, an updated list of participants. And a lot of these wrong approvals actually cause a lot of downstream work and cleanup for the admin. And especially since we just shipped, the ability to require review for all transactions, the number of transactions that kind of enter into the manager's review queue is growing. So we recently shipped kind of a contextual approval experience. So previously, when a manager goes in and approves transactions, we have an optional field for them to provide a note for the admin. Now, if we see that it's still missing information, then we require managers to add more context or add more justification to that. In addition to that, we also shipped a ready to approve toggle on the right here, you can see. So this one allows the manager to have a default view of flag transactions that filters for the ones where all of the required documentation and receipts are available before managers go in and approve. This way, it's easier for managers who understandably aren't as familiar with the product as maybe an admin is, to just know exactly where and what they need to approve and when it's ready for approval. We've seen a very promising results so far. So we've seen like a 70% reduction in non-compliant approvals, i.e. like wrong approvals, because a lot of these workflows are a lot clearer. And we also see a 50% reduction in time to approve transactions for managers. So a lot of this we think is because, showing the ready to approve only queue for managers, it's so easy and simple for them that they can just go in and kind of go through everything that needs approval without having to deal with, trying to understand context for every single transaction. Next slide, Josh. This is something that's coming. We're currently in a closed beta. If you guys are interested, please reach out to us so we can also onboard you. But we are bringing Navan to a Slack near you. We know a lot of our customers use Slack as their main communication and collaboration tool within the org. So we wanted to bring Navan to Slack to make it easier for your employees and for your managers and approvers to go through all of their tasks on Navan. So for approvers, we're gonna introduce a way for approvers to see all of their ready to approve transactions with all of the context needed. And then for the employees, we make it easier for them to also see all of their flag transactions. They can upload the receipt. They can add a description, add participants, all without leaving Slack, which we are hoping will bring down these like compliance times even more. Okay, I want to spend some time chatting about the AI workflows that we're, thinking about building internally. And a lot of these are actually already in beta. So same kind of nudge to reach out to your AMs if you guys are wanting to take part in this beta program. But our vision really for admin AI is to automate all of the routine and predictable busy work that come with, manual reviews of expenses and empower admins to focus on a lot of the high impact, kind of strategic governance type work, without having to be bogged down by, chasing people, reviewing expenses that are likely, most of the time is going to be approved. And so a couple of things that, we have here is focused on making the spend review process a lot more automated, and introducing, AI that learns from your past actions, your organization's policy, and then comes up with these suggestions to make your lives like a lot easier. So one of these is the first one is suggested replies. So this is, touches on that chasing component, where admins, most of the time spend a lot of time chasing employees for receipts, for missing information, missing participants. And you usually do that today through Navan. You can request more information on transactions. And so now we automate that part and, propose a message for you so that you don't even need to think about it. You can just send the message that we propose. And then that model also learns from past messages that you've sent and picks up on your, the tone you use and the way you craft sentences, so that it's very aligned to the admin's style. We're currently in a beta for this and we're up to 40% like acceptance. And so that means, 40% of the suggested responses are mostly accepted by admins from the get-go. And we're looking to bring this up even more. The second part is about automated transaction routing. And so this is where the AI, we basically see what's the activity within transactions, and we are able to automatically route, a transaction where you have maybe requested information back to flagged if we see that the employee has provided all the information. So this is where, you can imagine an admin leaving a note for the user to add the receipt and add participants for this meal expense. And once the user provides those information, we automatically either run it through the policy and maybe it gets auto approved, or if it still flags if the policy still flags it, it goes back to your flag queue. So the admin doesn't need to kind of think about, okay, what are the transactions that I've opened requests on? They immediately see everything in one place. Lastly, we also have suggested actions. So this is where we take it a step further through the your spend review process and look at the flag transactions and suggest actions based on your policy and your personal tolerance for these like policy flags. So for instance, you might have a org policy that says that meals have to be under $25. But within the admin team, you know that if it goes over by 10%, usually if it's justified, you see all the participants, you will go ahead and approve it anyway. And so we pick up on these very nuanced actions and nuanced like logic and apply it to the suggested action so that you don't need to spend a lot of brain power really understanding each transaction and making a decision based off of that. So this is what we have right now in beta. Some of the things that we're planning to do in the next few months is taking this a step further and maybe where you don't even need to go in and see the transaction or generate like an action. We automatically, you log into Navan, we give you everything you need to do based on our assessment, and you click a button and then go through all of your open transactions. So, yeah, Josh, next slide. Okay. So to kind of wrap up, a lot of what we've talked about is related to really streamlining your process from when the user, the employee swipes their Navan card to posting to your ERP. A lot of what Thomas talked about is about, strengthening that automation arm and making sure that majority of the transactions are auto approved. A lot of what I talked about is, that 25% of transactions that need to go through manual approval and, introducing ways to make that faster. So next we have Amanda, and who's going to be talking about spend that happens outside of your Navan corporate cards and how we help you manage that better.
Thank you for that, Pauline. Hey everyone, my name's Amanda, and I'm super, super excited to share more about what the user experience is like. I'm one of the PMs on the user empowerment team, so very, very excited to chat with y'all today. Before I actually get into that, Josh, if you wouldn't mind staying on the previous slide, I wanted to just provide a little bit more context while people are filling this in. For those of you who have used Navan in the past, you're probably familiar with our card solution. And if I do say so myself, it is rather seamless and magical. But if you submit more out-of-pocket reimbursements with your personal card, historically it's a little bit more tedious when it comes to setting up reimbursements. So if you're someone that tends to like to pile up receipts towards the end of the month, it does take quite some time to get your reimbursements ready to go. And so that kind of leads into this question that we have in the poll, asking the room here, how long do you think it takes on average to submit an out-of-pocket expense? And interestingly enough, majority of the users here are saying 1 to 5 minutes. But Josh, if you wouldn't mind sharing the response that we see, it's actually closer to 11 and a half minutes. And this is a general average, right? So we have people who are submitting faster, but generally people who take a bit more time. So that kind of gauges a little bit of why we went about solving this issue. And that's where I would like to, Josh, if you wouldn't mind, next slide, introducing expense chat, where our goal is to help you fill out your out-of-pocket expenses through the chat way. And what does that mean? We're trying to replace the current manual form process and clicking between multiple fields with a simple AI conversation. And as the end user, what do you have to do? It's rather simple. You either have to drop in your receipts or provide as much context as you want regarding a mileage or any team outing or meal that you want into a chat, and the agent handles the rest. So what our agents are going to be doing is we're going to be looking at your receipts, pulling in relevant data regarding your transactions, your merchants, any tax or itemized line items. We'll also look at the individual user's information. What that means is if you have any bookings on Navan, we'll pull that information in. If you expensed in the past as well, we'll also look at any expensing behavior and apply that to your transactions. All you have to do is validate and get those submitted. But if for whatever reason you want to make any changes, how you can do that, I'll show you in a bit, but it's actually really simple. You can either type that into chat or I can show you a little bit more about our sneaky little shortcut function, which is super convenient when you have a bunch of transactions that you want to get submitted in one go. I'll make a call out that right now we've actually launched this chat function a little over a month ago for users that are primarily in the US and on the web app. But very quick soon, we're going to be releasing out to the rest of EMEA as well as moving over to mobile down the line. So, some exciting things to look out for. And Josh, would you mind sharing next slide? Like I said earlier, we've had this chat out for a little over a month now. We've been very, very pleased with how the user responses have been so far. So on the top, you just have some sample user sentiments of either users that were a bit hesitant about an AI first chat function to all those that were super excited to play around with what chat means. On the bottom here, you're going to see some high level metrics of what we've seen so far. Particularly happy about the over $9 million submitted already in the last 9 weeks. The middle number, 56 seconds, is one of my favorites, where we have a user that in one conversation in under a minute was able to get 24 expenses successfully filled in and submitted for their admins to review. And then the last number is our average customer satisfaction score right now of around 90, which is great. And then on the right over here, this is just a sample of how our users have already started adapting and learning how to get their expenses even more quickly ready to get submitted. So this is a sample mileage transaction that has many, many stops. And traditionally, you may have to click between multiple different fields, look up the exact address, specify the route, but all you have to do is what we're calling one shot, provide your entire story into one message, and the agent gets everything ready, and you just have to click submit. So super convenient experience. And I think rather than saying more, I would love to dive into a demo. So if you all can see my screen, this is an example of a user's expense environment. So how to actually access this chat. Right now, if you click on new transaction and if you either start from adding a receipt, typing in details, or log mileage, you'll be presented with an option to experience our chat. And every single time you submit a manual reimbursement, we ask you this up front, but eventually we'll move this out of the individual entry points. But let's say for now I want to generate with AI. And this is my landing screen. And you can either start typing in information on the bottom here, or let's grab a couple receipts. So let's just grab 3 random ones that I have ready, and I can get those submitted. So what's happening right now is our agents in the background are going to be going through multiple tool calls. So what that means is we're going to first look at any receipt data that we can capture from our OCR, which includes anything from transaction date, amount, currency, items, etc. And from there, we're going to hand off now to looking at the actual user information. So we're going to look at if this user has any trips on Navan that might have already that have been on the same transaction date, any calendar event, for example, that we can also tie this expense to if you have a calendar connected. And then the most magical piece is filling in any last remaining information that we can pull based on your expensing history. And so here we have 3 transactions. And what's nice about chat, it now tells you, oh, you have 2 transactions that are missing a required field for fruits. And so let's do a sample of a couple edits here. So not by default right now, our Teleferic Barcelona transaction is a meals for myself, but I actually want to edit it to, let's say, let's say team event. And I want to add Yuval and AL to this transaction, and this is multiple changes in one message. And we can see this happening live here on the right. So both of these fields are going to get updated, expense type and participants. There we go. And we can take one last look here of, okay, cool. So the remaining last field that I have required is fruits. And so I teased a little bit earlier of our shortcut, and we also mentioned this here. So rather than typing in, show me what options I have for fruits, or I want to do this, I can actually backslash and just search up the field. And I can either make that change for all receipts or individual one, but let's just say all, and I want to change it to guava. Same thing here. We're going to see the chat make an update to both transactions live, and that's going to satisfy the missing required field requirement. Awesome. And then I can just double check that everything is filled in. And all I need to do now is just submit. And the last thing that I need to do now is the agents are going to be validating every transaction one by one, just to make sure that one, there's no more missing information that is needed, and then two, just validating that this receipt is actually ready to go to get submitted. And once it's submitted, it is up to the admins to then go in and review. And I actually did a sample of what we're calling a multi-message conversation, but we've actually seen our users, funny enough, presenting all of this information up front in one single message. So you also have an interaction of basically two messages. And there we go. That's a sample view of how Expense Chat works. Happy to answer any questions in the Q&A. And I hand it off to Shruti.
Hey everyone, hi. My name is Shruti. And on the same lines of what Amanda just presented, talking about the user experience. Josh, next slide, please. I am incredibly proud of what we've launched when we talk about receipts, and especially a dedicated space for receipts to sit. And with that being said, I directly want to jump into the demo because there's so much to talk about when we talk about Receipt Inbox. So Receipt Inbox is basically in a line, a dedicated space for you to see your receipts. And it not only just stores your receipts, but it actually understands the receipt in terms of your incoming transactions. Now, in an ideal world, we have multiple flavors of transaction where you have an initial auth, posted auth, you give a tip, the transaction gets updated to the current amount. And this is exactly where Receipt Inbox comes into play, because we do understand all types of transactions and we understand the receipts and the data that comes in with the receipt. So what we've introduced when we talk about an inbox for receipts is unattached and recently attached folders to your Receipt Inbox. Unattached basically acts as a perfect space for the frequent travelers that some of you are, where you have a receipt, grab and go, put it in the Receipt Inbox, come back later and create a reimbursement. And that's exactly what I'm going to do here. I click on the receipt, which is already sitting in my unattached inbox, and I just say new reimbursement and wait for the magic to happen. It creates a transaction, there's a receipt attached, submit. Now, take it with a grain of salt. I'm using my demo account, so obviously it's going to have some flags, but in an ideal situation where everything is configured correctly, you should be able to submit it and you should be able to get your money in your bank account. What happens when you want to send a few receipts and you want a couple of transactions to match? So let's say you have the Amex Connect card that we have, and you have a posted transaction that gets submitted into your expenses, and then you get a receipt, right? It's all not always in a sequential manner. So Receipt Inbox is actually addressed to cater that edge case as well, where we take care of your posted or an initial auth transaction, and we automatically match your incoming receipts so that you don't have to do the mix and match of receipts to the transaction. So I'm just going to quickly show you just adding a few transactions here. So you go to new transaction flow, you add in your receipts. So I have a Chipotle receipt here and a Starbucks one, and I'm just going to upload it. It gives me a cool little option of create two transaction. I click on it. Till it's uploading the receipts, I also want to quickly call out and say that what we are doing with Receipt Inbox V2, which is basically coming in May, is we are allowing users to basically upload and go on the fly. So same thing, you can just click here. It's a Starbucks receipt. I want to attach it to a transaction. I already have it posted. Boom, attach. As simple as that. With Receipt Inbox V2, we want to give the end users the ability to upload and walk away. So you should be able to close your mobile app, close your web tab, and come back, and we will handle your uploads. You can upload as many receipts as you want. We do allow concurrent uploads, so watch this space for more. And with that being said, I will pass it back to Josh.
Thanks, team. And I will tap in Thomas and Nadav to talk about some of our global compliance updates.
Yeah, sounds great. Thanks so much, everybody. Yeah, I kind of manage a lot of our international products and features across per diem and mileage and receipts and things like that. So I'll jump into that next. Cool. Yeah. So, I think Navan from day one has always been a global company. I think especially given the travel side of the house, we've always had to operate super globally, and so we want to make sure that the expense product kind of reflects that as well. And there's a lot of different requirements and regulations and things that we have to comply with to allow our customers to use us across the globe. And I'll start here. I think expense advances is something that we built to support a lot of customers across, really across the globe. For example, in Poland, this is actually a a regulatory requirement to allow for this. So this is live now. So this feature essentially allows users to request funds up front before they actually go on their trip, so that they're not having to come out of pocket for companies that don't want to use corporate cards in those regions. So this is something that the companies can set up now in their policy. And then, sorry, I'm breezing through these a little bit, but I'll jump through mileage offset as well. This has been a big ask across the globe too, where a lot of different tax laws and just regulations require commute distance to not be counted in mileage, basically. So we've built this feature that basically allows the user to deduct their commute from the actual mileage claim, which allows you to be more compliant in different regions. And then I'll jump into per diems next. Each country, especially in Europe, has all sorts of different requirements around per diem, and we launched Austrian per diems recently and Polish per diems. So in Poland, there's a lot of regulation around bringing in their central bank exchange rates, as well as different rolling clock rules that you have to apply when submitting. So we just launched this recently as well, so that anyone claiming per diem in Poland is fully compliant over there. And then I'll go through flexible reimbursements as well before passing it off to Nadav. But now that we've kind of built this product out, admins can reimburse employees directly across Euro and GBP currencies from those different bank accounts. So that's been a big unlock for a lot of our European clients. And I'll pass it off to Nadav.
Thank you, Thomas. I'm Nadav from Navan's Commerce invoicing team. And as you may have noticed, we are currently in a global shift where tax authorities are moving from checking paper to controlling data. By 2027, most EU countries will mandate structured e-invoicing. This means that if your invoice in Europe is not government-mandated digital file, it's legally void. And Navan, we don't just track these mandates, we're building the products to help you ensure your travel program remains audit ready. While most travel management companies use a model where they invoice you directly for a travel spend, it makes the TMC the seller in the eyes of the tax office. It breaks the legal link between you and the actual supplier, which is the hotel or the airline, which makes it impossible for you to reclaim VAT in Europe. Navan is different. We ensure the invoicing remains directly between you and the supplier, which is the only way to protect your full right for a VAT refund. Our three-layer strategic approach for e-invoicing is that we always try to invoice on behalf of the supplier. So for major partners like Lufthansa Group and Deutsche Bahn, we issue legal tax invoices directly in their name. This means that you are able to get your invoice directly in Navan within the product without any complications. We also have technical readiness to issue these compliant invoices anywhere in Europe, as long as we get the commercial approval from the suppliers themselves. When we don't have that approval from the supplier, we do automated retrieval, which means we try to get the invoices directly from the systems in Europe, so you don't have to chase them. And when that is not possible, we will generate a receipt with an XML. This will be the fallback for any transaction in Navan in Europe. So this ensures that regardless of the supplier, you always have a digital audit file required by the new EU mandates. As the mandates go into place, we're tracking them very closely and we're making sure that Navan and you are ready well ahead of the time the mandate goes into practice. That was a little bit about e-invoicing, and now bringing it back to Josh.
Great. Thanks, Nadav and team. So if everybody wants to join me again, we've got about 14 minutes for some Q&A. And thank you to everybody who submitted questions throughout and to our speakers who've answered quite a number of the questions live, and happy to address a few more of them here. So one question I saw come in, Thomas, I think this is for you, is what's the difference between rules-based coding and AI coding?
Oh yeah, it's a good question. So I mean, on and I kind of spoke to this a little bit during the beginning of what I was talking about the coding agent, which is a lot of the pre-AI world allows you to say, look, based on MCC code X, code to expense type Y, or merchant X, expense type Y. And I think there's still for sure a place for that. There's certain just accounting rules that you want to basically just be perfect and like never fail and always be the exact same thing across the board. But especially with merchant data, there's a lot more nuance involved. I mean, a lot of people have been talking about Amazon, for example. You can't really create a merchant rule about Amazon because you can buy anything on Amazon. I mean, even Home Depot. Maybe you stop by Home Depot and you get a snack instead of buying tools. There's a lot of nuance there, and I think where AI can really help is it can reason like a human being. And it can look across, it can take the time to kind of look across all of the transaction data and the receipt data to make a decision, so that you don't really have to set these super rigid rules. That's kind of the goal. Again, I do think there is a world where both exist, but I think AI can generally make much smarter decisions.
Great. Another one came in, Pauline, I believe this one's more for you, but how can we audit the reasoning for why the agent suggested an action related to some of the admin AI work?
Yeah, so a couple things. Within the suggested action, we will show a list of kind of the rationale and the thinking that went behind a suggestion. So in that way, you kind of understand why the agent is suggesting the action that it's suggesting. The second part of that is being able to kind of correct and instruct the agent to apply certain exceptions or change the logic for certain merchants. And that's also something that you can do within that flow. So, yeah.
All right, great. Just had another one come in. Thomas, probably for you, but I guess whoever wants to take. Are you putting in solutions to help medical device companies track sunshine reporting requirements and NPI numbers of doctors?
Oh yeah, that's an interesting question. It's a great one because it is top of mind for us. I don't have a strong timeline yet, but I think we're hoping this year to definitely have the ability to comply with and support the Sunshine Act companies, so that you can pull in NPI numbers and things like that for pharma companies.
All right, great. One probably for Amanda. If I have multiple expenses I want to create in the expense chat, do I need to upload multiple images of individual receipts?
So great that you asked that question, Josh, because Expense Chat actually, on top of being able to support different expense types in one conversation, also allows you to send one photo in of multiple receipts, and our agents will parse and split into multiple expenses. So, for example, if I have 5 receipts and one image, I have 5 transactions that get created, all with the respective snapshot of the receipt and that data captured at the transaction level. So, yeah.
Okay, great. I know we got a few slacks about, or sorry, not slacks on the brain. A few messages on here about the capabilities of approval in Slack going to other systems like Microsoft Teams. So, Pauline, if you want to speak to that.
Yes. So we're getting huge demand for Microsoft Teams, and it's on our Teams roadmap. And so after we roll out Slack and address a lot of the most common workflows for managers, approvers, and users, we're planning to extend that capability onto Teams.
All right, great. One other one here. Is there an option to consider a user on a trip from entering mileage and their calendar integration? To my knowledge, it's considered a trip in a flight, hotel, or rental is booked. So numerous expenses are considered not on trip when they did travel.
Yeah, I'll take that one. It's one of my favorite features. The reason I love this feature so much is because of its name. We called it, but I'm on a trip. So users actually have the ability to say, if they're not on a trip, to say, yes, I am actually on a trip. And, you can set it up in policy where it goes over to a manager approval to say, yes, I approve this user is actually on a trip, even though they don't have a hotel or a flight booked. They took their car, they're expensing. And then you can consider all of those expenses as part of a specific trip.
Actually, great. One more back to you, Pauline, on Slack. Is the Slack integration mainly used for communicating to users about info needed or flag transactions?
All of the above. So basically, what happens is we will, for managers and approvers, we send them a notification for every expense that's flagged that has all the receipt, participants, all that information provided by the user and is ready for that stamp of approval. And so within that transaction, the approver can either approve, reject, or request more information. So if they wanted to request more information, they can do that on Slack. They can just simply reply to the transaction message, and that will log that response and then also reflect it on Navan.
Right, great. And one from the receipt inbox side, Shruti. Um, how are you addressing data privacy when it comes to adding receipt photos or photos from someone's library?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think privacy is definitely, not an afterthought for us. We definitely take that into when we, build up the architecture. So, we make sure like, we are going by the compliance, taking users' consent. User has verified their personal email before they send us all the data. And that's how we use AI to like match the receipt or the photos that they are sending in a very simpler, safe way.
Gotcha, thanks. And then one for, I think this is for you, Nadav, but so our current agency sends us one consolidated monthly invoice for all of our travel spend. So why does Navan provide individual supplier invoices instead?
Yeah, it's one of those classic trade-offs you have between the bill back models and between the Navan agent model. So when an agency sends you one big invoice, they legally become the seller and you're not able to reclaim VAT for that invoice. And Navan, we provide the original supplier invoice when we can, so you can always have the invoice for VAT reclamation. That being said, there's definitely things that can be used for the consolidated receipt, definitely in terms of reconciliation, which is something that we're looking also to add to our product within the next few months.
Gotcha, that's great. One more I saw come through. Actually, we have time for a few more. Once the expense is approved by the manager and maybe later it's realized that is wrongly approved, can the manager recall the expense or reject it again? So kind of going back as a postmortem.
Yeah, I mean, managers do have the ability to go back and do that. I mean, if I remember correctly, there are some rules around once a reimbursement has already fully occurred, that there's some locking that happens where a manager can't go back and kind of like claw back the reimbursement. But usually, if they're able to do it on a pretty short timeline, they can action and kind of reject the transaction after the fact.
Gotcha. Great. All right, let's see what other ones are flying in here. I think this one's for you, Pauline. Can the agent use our policy documents to make decisions?
Yes, and I'm assuming by policy document, you're referring to the policy that you have set up within Navan. In which case, yes, that is one of the inputs that the agent will be looking at. A few other inputs that we consider is, the users, the employees' spend history, like how often are they going over the spend limit, how compliant are they, all of that factor into this decision. We also take a look at, the admin's specific like threshold and activity. So as an admin, are you more likely to approve things that are just 5% over threshold, more likely to reject if it's over 20%? Each of those kind of buckets will play into the final suggestion that we make.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think one question from David down here that I thought was interesting, and I could take an
Sure.
initial shot at it, and Pauline, you can follow up. Um, David said, "What's the difference between my company's T&E policy and what you needed for the Navan T&E policy?" I think the thinking in here is there's a lot of rules that you can code into Navan directly for sure, that try to reflect your policy. But what our agent's trying to do is actually look at your policy documentation and take into account more nuanced rules or policies or things that you can't just directly code into software. So we'll kind of we'll have the agent take into account the document itself when making suggestions.
Nice. Any others that you guys saw that you wanted to address off the bat?
This one from Bonnie on the Slack integration, I think Bonnie, it's something that we're working on right now, and that we're hoping to ship very soon. But it's not available today, at least
It's
for what we
Yeah,
want to
it's not
build.
yet live. It's in beta, Bonnie. So if you want to have your org kind of enrolled, feel free to reach out to your AM, and we'll be happy to add you guys to the beta.
Mhm.
Cool. All right. I think we've got time for maybe one more here. Aaron said if an expense is itemized for personal expenses, is there an option in the works to send to the manager for approval rather than requiring the admin to approve?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I guess the approval flows are kind of dependent on what you set in policy. So if a transaction's flagged and the manager set as the approver, it'll go to them. If it's for an admin, it'll go to the admin. So it should really depend on who the approver was, at the time that the transaction occurred.
Great. So thanks for all the questions. I think last thing just for Yuval, just to wrap us up here. So I guess how are you thinking about like everything we covered today? How is it really enhanced by Navan's travel infrastructure and data set?
Yeah, I think that's the magic of, what we have because at the end of the day, if you think about expensing, most of the expensing that people do, 90% of the expenses that people do, they do while they travel. So the travel really brings a lot of context into the expense itself. At the end of the day, when you're submitting an expense, the most important thing that admins are trying to get answered is why did you submit this expense? And we're asking that why from a lot of different reasons. What client does it belong to? How do I bill it to? What expense type is it? Can you give me a receipt? And it's all about that story. And travel really adds a lot of context because it already knows, why you're going to where you're going and why you're flying and the fact that you're on a trip. And it really rounds up the whole expense story.
Great. So with that, I think we'll wrap. So really appreciate everybody joining today. Loved all the questions and appreciate our team for showing up. If you're a customer, a few things coming up for you. So next month we have an ERP specific webinar we're going to host. So we'll send out some invites to that. We'll also have our monthly expense admin office hours next month as well, where we'll kind of dive into some of the recent releases, things upcoming, and answer some of your tactical questions as well. There's going to be a survey that I'll show right as I end this webinar. But again, appreciate everybody and have a great rest of your day. Thanks, team.
Awesome. Thanks, y'all.